Okay, so I've decided to make a video just reviewing this past Sunday's Sunday Race Club on MyWhoosh. It's the first time I've kind of reviewed back over one of the MyWhoosh Sunday Race Club events. But this event itself, I felt there were a number of kind of learning points that I could take from it. There were a couple of things that I think I did wrong. I perhaps could have done a little bit differently. And yeah, I'm fairly new, relatively speaking, new to racing on MyWhoosh. The dynamics of how the avatars move and the drafting and everything else is different to the other platforms that people are more familiar with. And this was a little bit slightly more unique in Sunday Race Club events. Reason for that is this was actually fairly flat. Now, for anyone who knows Sunday Race Club, they know the type of parkour that are used in the races will absolutely understand that they often use very, very hilly routes. I sort of think this partly is down to the need to kind of create some real sort of attritional type racing. There's also a need. The Sunday Race Club does have actual monetary prizes that kind of go along with it. So there is, of course, that need to make sure that there's a lot of verification and the performances are correct. And I think by making the courses quite tough, quite attritional, getting them set up in the way that there's different length climbs, etc., to really test out different riders' sort of, their capabilities and their power profiles. I think that's probably partly why they use it. This route was relatively, I'm going to use the phrase relatively flat, because there was still sort of 350 metres of elevation over the 50 kilometres, but it was a flatter than usual route. So there's a couple of key sections where I think there's some lessons to be learned. So we'll kind of have a little skip through and have a little look at some of those and just kind of break them down, kind of review them. I'll discuss a little bit of what my thinking was, and also some of my thoughts about perhaps how I could have improved. Just out of the pens though, I felt as if I was potentially in for a little bit of a problem. My heart rate for what is not an easy effort, okay, like we've been on the gas, but also it was, relatively, in inverted commas, relatively easy. We weren't going crazy hard. We weren't pushing massive power. The power I hadn't had to really spike the power. But my heart rate this early on was already, you can see it there, 174. 175 is already actually quite high on this little tiny rise, 1.5-2%. So I was a little bit concerned that actually there could be some issues on the horizon here. My heart rate, I have got a high heart rate anyway, but 179, I'm just kind of getting up to what like my sort of threshold is, my threshold heart rate band now, kind of high 170s, low 180s. But this early on, when there's still 48k of racing left and, we've taken on a small bump, was a little bit concerning. Legs felt okay. I recall my legs feeling okay, but something did seem slightly amiss just with my performance. So I was concerned about how it went, but we'll have a little look now at some key sections and discuss what went on. So we've dropped through to 26 minutes into the race. So we've just begun the Liwa desert climb. This is a relatively short climb. I think it's just over 900 metres long. But as is always the case, it seems, on any type of climb on MyWhoosh, it would be full gas, like really full gas. We'd had a couple of sprint segments, or a single sprint segment prior to this, where I didn't go for. I wasn't planning on contesting because I felt that I had a strong chance at the finish line today. So I wasn't planning on contesting. I was going to keep all my matches basically as dry as possible. But we're early on this climb. It's a bit of a two-part climb. You can see the route profile there in the top right-hand corner. It's kind of 6-7%, but we've been high 7s, 8 watts per kilo. Heart rate's up in the 190s. And at this point, we are probably a minute, just over a minute. There we are, 1 minute, 8 seconds into the climb. The climb was going to take us ballpark, kind of 1 minute 45. So I was really concerned I wasn't going to hold on. Really high heart rate. The lactate was really building up. Again, what there is on the segment here is there is a prize for the KOM jersey. I wasn't planning on trying to go for that. It really wasn't something I was planning on going for. I was just planning on basically trying to hold on. But you can see it in the kind of picture-in-picture there. My heart rate's up in the high 190s now, and that group is just starting to stretch. I can see a little group of sort of 5 or 6 have kind of clipped off the front. I was really blowing. I've ridden that climb a number of times in Sunday Race Club, and it's short enough that I can kind of usually punch over it, but yeah, I just was struggling. But it was important. You can see there's a little secondary kick on this climb, on this road here. So we finished the actual climb, but there's a little kicker coming up, and this little flat section is really key. The draft I've noticed on MyWhoosh it's there. You can see my number was green. Yeah, when the number's green, the power number is green, you're in the draft. When it's white, you're out of the draft. But what can happen is you can get spat out the back very, very quickly. So there was a couple of bike lengths in front of me there just as we crested the actual KOM. I couldn't hold the wheels, in all honesty. I was really blown. So that gap opened, and I just knew that it was absolutely critical to kind of go across that gap, and to make sure that I made contact with the back of the group on the front before we got to this little secondary rise. Just because if I knew the power was going to go up when the riders got to this little kick at this second climb, I knew that they were going to hit out, and it was going to be another 6, 7, 8 watt per kilo effort for probably a minute or so. So therefore, if I wasn't with them, I wasn't experiencing a little bit of that draft benefit from being there, it would be even harder for me to come across that gap after we'd finished the climb. So yeah, heart rate again up in the mid 190s there. You can see in the picture I've gone really as deep as I could possibly go. I really wasn't feeling particularly good. I was just hoping now that I'd made it over that climb. Well, I had made it over the climb. And I was just hoping that the actual group was going to actually, was going to ease up a little bit. But at this point here, there was a little bit of a talk of a couple of riders looking to do a bit of a breakaway, because as the main pack was easing up after the climb, it was a perfect opportunity for guys to go. I wanted to make sure that if it went, even though I was really hurting, I wanted to try and make sure that I could be with it. So I just tried to give it a little bit of an extra dig, just to kind of hold those wheels, but mercifully, as far as I was concerned. The pack did ease up, and thankfully there was an opportunity to get a little bit of recovery in. So that climb was really a first major checkpoint for myself. I kind of was almost not even going to start thinking about the finish line or anything else until I knew I was over that climb, because there was always the potential, particularly how I felt with my high heart rate early on, that I wasn't going to make it. So thankfully I was over it. It dropped probably half the pack, at least half the pack went. It was a big effort, it was sort of like knocking on for 2 minutes. I looked back at my power, it was sort of 520 watts for 2 minutes, so the climb was slightly shorter than 2 minutes. So it made the actual duration of the climb, the power needed would have been slightly more, probably in the region of 530. So a fairly substantial effort, but we're there. We're over the climb, we're in the pack. Time to take a gel, ease up, get as much recovery as I possibly could, and start thinking now about how we're going to go about approaching the second half of the race. Okay, so we've dropped forward now to 42 kilometres, just over an hour into the race. And it's been hard. It's been hard, but it's stayed relatively stable, nothing crazy. This is a very key point. Just around the corner of the bend there, you can see there's a rider has just got off the front of the group. Is attempting that bit of a breakaway. At this point, I was kind of thinking, I know the name of the rider. I know that he likes a breakaway and he rides quite strongly. Now, it didn't look like there was, you can see him just up the road there. Breakaways definitely seem to have more chance of sticking in MyWhoosh than they do perhaps in, say, Zwift. I think riders really need to put effort into the pack on MyWhoosh in order to drive the speed of it. The speed doesn't sort of organically seem to roll, if you know what I mean. You actually need guys to drive it. So a solo rider or a very small group of riders have a really strong chance in actually being able to stay away. So he was at sort of 5-6 seconds at this point, and his gap was growing. And I thought to myself, we really need to try and go across here. We really need to try and go across. I hoped at this point here these guys were going to try and bridge, but it's one of those things, isn't it? It's a really difficult thing to get right. I wanted the gap to close, but obviously, do you really want to be the person doing the work that then drags the other riders with them? Because then they are more likely, of course, to beat in the sprint. You can just see there, Patrick Bloom, 7 seconds, okay? So he's 7 seconds up the road. Those guys give it a bit of an effort. I was thinking, great, this is awesome. I'll try and follow the wheels. They backed off really, really quickly. So, it didn't really go across. Now, I was more than happy to try and get there. But I didn't want to be the person who did it myself, If there were a couple of us could do it. But I decided we need to go. Something needs to happen because the gap had got up to sort of 9 seconds or 8 seconds. I thought, it's going to go. The gap's going out. So if we are going to make it across, we need to get there and we need to go now. So I thought, I'll do it. I'll sacrifice. There's still kind of, 43.7k, 50k. So I thought I'd give it a bit of an effort to try and encourage others to come with me. So I gave it a little kick. And some riders did come with me. And the gap did start coming down. It did come, we'd sort of chopped just in that short effort there. We had managed to chop kind of 2 or 3 seconds from his gap. And it looked like, it really did start looking like that guys were going to work. And you could see it. You could see that time gap coming down. It did hurt me though. He's just in front of the Cat 4 riders there in red. Okay, so he's only just up the road. And I thought, yes, it looks like this is going to come back. But then, seemingly out of nowhere, I did kind of hurt myself making that initial dig because, like I say, I wasn't feeling the best anyway. And it's been a little bit of an effort, even to sit in the wheels here. You're looking at a good 5 watts per kilo, probably average to sit there. And that gap was coming back. It got to 2 or 3 seconds, and I just decided perhaps not to punch again myself because I thought it was going to come back across. And this was something where this is one of the first big takeaways really that I've personally got, which is why I wanted to look back at this race, is that he was so close. He's just around the corner there, but we all backed off. Now, what I did, right, is that I did almost a halfway house effort. So I did a bit of an effort to try and instigate the chase, but I didn't do a huge effort. I didn't fully commit to it. Now, at this point, or maybe 30 seconds prior, I could have gone, no, I'm going for it, and tried committing to going across. And either I would have got to him, or I would have blown up and been out the back. I should have gone all in, but I didn't do that. I kind of went half in, so burnt a lot of matches. But I also then didn't do nothing and sit in the wheels. So I actually hurt myself, but not fully. But I also didn't remain rested. So if that makes any sort of sense, I kind of didn't fully commit to it, but I also didn't do nothing. So I either should have committed to that Guys, you can just see all of a sudden now his gap's going out. His gap's going out. It's getting to 3 seconds, 4 seconds, 5 seconds, or because we've backed off in the pack, and he's on his way again. He's on his way. So it came where we were close to getting him back, but he's gone. He's gone, and we won't see him again. He gets away and he takes a solo win. So credit to the rider himself. Really strong rider. Got away, took the win. Pack, we backed off. So in hindsight, I should have gone across that gap. I should have really just committed to it, and I either made it or I didn't make it. And that would have been that. Or I could have sat in the pack, saved the legs, and been perhaps in a better position come the sprint. So we're going to jump forward a couple of K and just kind of look at the final sort of sprint section. Okay, so we're at 48k, 2.3 from the finish line. And there's a little bump here on the circuit. Again, like I say, this effort is pushing my heart rate up into high 180s. And this has come sort of maybe 5 minutes after that little try and kick to follow the break. This is quite a big pack, actually. It's quite uncommon in Sunday Race Club to have such a large peloton, I suppose. Such a large group going into the sprint. It's not something I've experienced before. It's usually, because the races are so sort of attritional, it's usually a lot of a smaller pack, and you might be sprinting from a group of, say, 5 or 6 riders maximum, or like 2s and 3s. It's quite uncommon to have such a large group coming into a sprint finish. So that was something I hadn't experienced, and I learned a lot. This is where there's a guy there in the polka dot jersey. He goes long. He tries putting in a long effort. So basically, I have to go, or everyone has to go. Without making an effort here, you're dropped and you're not going to feature in the finish. So I really didn't have the legs for it. In all honesty, I didn't have the legs. I didn't want to have to make that effort because I knew with 1.5 kilometres until the sprint, I was really burning myself. Right, he backs off. At this point, I was looking at that line of riders up the road. So we were just catching the Cat 4 group. I was looking at it thinking there's 1 kilometre to go. And there's an opportunity for someone here to sprint really long and do a long effort, like a minute-long effort. Because that line of riders would have given a draft benefit. And I remember thinking to myself, if somebody commits to this to go really long, they may go through that group, get the draft benefit of all his riders and actually stay away. And for myself, like, I'm kind of a reasonable-ish sprinter, but I'm not a really good sort of pure sprinter, so that would have suited me. I like a long sprint, like a 40, 45 second sprint. That would have suited me. And I was looking at it and I thought there's an opportunity for that, and I didn't take it. Big lesson, should have. Okay, we're getting closer to the actual finish, and it has eased up. I'm sat in the group here, and this is where I make a real fatal error. Real fatal error. Just as we round this corner, I was trying to ease off and get my legs to kind of get a bit of recuperation. I dropped to the back of the group. That was a massive error. In MyWhoosh, it's the first time I've experienced a pack sprint of this size. You just don't come through riders in the same way. It doesn't seem as if you fluidly sprint through like a drafting blob. So I come through a lot of riders. And if I actually look at my watts per kilo, it wasn't a brilliant sprint in all honesty, but if I look at my watts per kilo, it is higher or at least comparable to some riders. And I come through a lot of riders in that sprint. But I've come from so far back in the pack. I actually finished 7th. It is obscured there because of where my webcam is, but I finished 7th. Obviously, first took the win, but second place was within our pack. I definitely, maybe I couldn't have had second or third, but I definitely could have improved on that performance. I really say I haven't experienced sprinting in a pack of that size. I really should have worked harder at that kind of 700-800 metres to go mark, and actually being higher up in that pack. And it wouldn't have mattered if the sprint was slightly worse, because you don't tend to change position as much in the sprint. So that's another big takeaway for myself. So the big takeaways were, that chase for the breakaway, either commit to it or don't. In this case, I probably should have committed to it. Also, an opportunity presented itself with those, like, sort of a kilometre, 1.2 from the line, with that line of riders. I thought about it, I didn't do it. And again, sometimes it's better to be in charge of your own destiny, and perhaps by taking that, you either get a really good result or you're blown at the back, but you were in control of it. I left a lot more up to kind of chance there, I suppose, by allowing myself to be in that sprint, and then just let myself drop towards the back of that group, rather than fighting a little bit harder to be slightly higher up. But really good lessons to learn from what was probably the flattest, I think it's the flattest SRC they've ever done. But